I mean, if you look at drones in the history, I mean, President Clinton was really the first one to launch anything with drones during the Kosovo conflict. Where they've really taken off per se has been under the Obama administration. Bush used them heavily in both Yemen and Pakistan. But once Obama removed boots from the ground, we've had to replace that type of military tactic with something else, and Obama's moved towards drones. So you've seen a dramatic increase in the number of strikes, the number of attacks, while at the same time, the technology's allowed us to get better, so we're seeing less civilian casualties, we're seeing better targeting, we're seeing better information going into it. But if you really wanted a quote-unquote year, it's really 2009, 2010, once we start the withdrawal from Afghanistan and have to replace again, the loss of ground soldiers with some other form of presence, which drones allow you kind of the perfect presence. You can fly them low enough where citizens hear them buzzing overhead without having to see an American soldier. There's obvious privacy concerns in the U.S. I think part of it is a lack of understanding, a fear of this thing's flying 30,000 feet ahead, and do they have microphones that can pick up the conversation we're having now? Is there a rifle scope pointed at my building? People don't understand what's going on because, again, they fly above the clouds. It's the equivalent of having an airliner in the sky, and you don't necessarily know what it's doing or why it's doing it. So I do think there are legitimate concerns about the privacy piece. However, I'm a believer that the increased security that comes from drones outweighs the privacy side. And we're seeing this. I mean, you're seeing local police departments in the United States. I think it's Houston's one of them, that started employing drones for different reasons. And again, some of it's speed control, some of it's surveillance. The fact is, if you can fly one of these at 10,000 feet and see what's happening below you in pretty clear pictures, there's clearly a security benefit to that. But at the same time, there are going to be individuals that question their right to privacy. And what it really comes back to in this country now is, it's a debate between civil liberties and security. What am I willing to give up to feel secure? I don't care if an unarmed, unmanned vehicle is flying 10,000 feet above the sky and sees me walking down the street if it's potentially saving me from something catastrophic or concerning. And again, not every citizen is going to view that because there are obviously concerns about the slippery slope it creates. If I give them the okay to do this, what's next? And again, it falls back to your personal ideology and belief systems to some extent. Basis for drones, I mean, part of this comes back, especially if you look at the national level, to questions of what's going to happen in an open, transparent court versus what's going to happen in a more closed-door setting. Again, obviously, internationally, with what we're doing with drones, a lot of it comes back to ties to international terrorism, which puts it into FISA courts, which are outside of the public purview, which means you just have to convince the right judge that there is something related to terrorism that this drone or this mission or this objective could help you prevent. And again, most judges are going to sign those papers because they don't want to be the judge who didn't sign the paperwork that could have prevented some disaster from occurring. If you look at the state and local level, you see a lot of laws that are written towards citizen privacy. I mean, in Florida, if you go back and look at legislation relevant to drones, it's pretty much, personal privacy based. And again, it comes back to the question of typically with the drones I look at, we're looking at national security. So national security trumps state and local law especially. Now, when it comes to things like people flying a drone over the fort in St. Augustine, you're going to have local restrictions. You're going to have, in some cases, FAA licensure. You're going to have national laws that kind of allow for some of that to be grounded for, again, security reasons. But again, the same language they're going to use in discussing that's going to be some guise of national security. The idea of a drone flying over a public park, a monument, a landmark, they're going to be able to point back and say, well, this makes it easy for people to scope the building, to look for weak spots in security, to look for ways of attack. And that type of language resonates, again, with judicial figures typically. So again, I don't think the law has yet caught up with drones as a technology. I don't think we've seen, at the city and state level especially, very well thought out, very specific sort of drone policies, especially in recognition of the fact that anything they write is going to be trumped by U.S. national security if that's how the federal government chooses to sort of guise it. The idea that the state of Florida is going to set up the National Guard to shoot down, CIA drones flying over Florida is not going to happen.